A county line is generally an organised network of individuals, although sometimes it is a single individual working in order to supply drugs, generally from a metropolis, a city such as London, into towns in Kent. They operate through the use of a single mobile phone, which is referred to as a line phone. They will then look to capture the market within the town that they are selling their drugs, obtain numbers for drug users, and send out marketing messages in bulk to those individuals, advertising the fact that they have drugs for sale, generally Class A drugs. They will look to monopolise the market through use of violence and intimidation to deter any other lines from working in the same area, and they'll look to intimidate and exploit young individuals into working for their organisation, to benefit their organisation, and also vulnerable people within the town to set up a base and employ a trade which we refer to as cuckooing in order to have a place to sell their drugs from within that town. Once we've received intelligence that a drug line is operating within Kent, we'll look to obtain communications data from the network provider. We'll then analyse that communications data to bolster our intelligence and build a better intelligence picture of how that line is operating. So we'll look to identify that it's sending out bulk text messages, and then we will look to identify how they're operating. And then once we have developed a full picture, we will look to disrupt and dismantle their operations through various means available to us. In Kent, we use a scoring matrix, which is completed once a month. We review and analyse intelligence and score intelligence based on a number of different vulnerabilities that we identify for a line, such as the use of children, the exploitation of vulnerable people, the use of violence, and the availability of weapons that the line may have available to them. That will then generate a score, and the lines are then based on the threat that they pose based on that score, and we will generally then work on those that pose the greatest threat, risk and harm. And also within the month period between the scoring being completed, we will look to identify any emerging threats, such as the use of vulnerable individuals and the exploitation of children, and we will target those lines as well in order to prevent any child or vulnerable person being exploited. We will generally find that the lines will rely on intimidation of local individuals, and as they look to monopolise a market, it's those that pose the greatest threat, risk and harm to the people of Kent. It's those who will exploit people and have no regard for other people's safety, and we will look to disrupt and dismantle those lines as an absolute priority. Minimum term generally is 3 years imprisonment, and that is just for a first-time offender who may be involved at a very basic level. However, the sentences do vary. I had someone recently sentenced. It was their first time being sentenced for a drugs offence. They were involved in the organisation of the supply of drugs, and they received a sentence in the region of 6 years imprisonment. So it varies depending on the involvement and the seriousness of their offending. He'd never received a custodial sentence for drugs in the past. It was his first time receiving a conviction for a Class A drug offence, and now he's facing a significant period of time in custody as a result of his actions. Involvement in the supply of drugs is a lifestyle choice. It isn't something that you can dip in and out of. Once you become involved in the supply of drugs, as is commonly seen, and you lose the drugs through arrest or through being robbed by another drug line, then you are indebted to that line that you are working for. We as the police will take a zero tolerance approach to those involved in the supply of drugs, and it is, if you receive a conviction for drug supply offences, it is a conviction that affects the rest of your life. It affects your employability, it affects the lifestyle choices that you can make, and goes so far as to affect the travel decisions that you can make in the future when applying for visas to other countries. So in 20 years' time, if you've turned a clean slate and decide that you want to go to America, that could potentially be disrupted by a lifestyle choice you made 20 years ago.